guest was looking at us.
In the house. We'll get to that slide.
Yeah,
here.
and so that was one of those features. And so you try to get your axes to make it work and become really a very special place that, as you were talking about, which I think Garden and Gun is soul, and how it creates and the people that made these things up in your magazine. So I think this represents the Dimmers very well. And we were so fortunate to have them as a client, and also for me to have the team that worked on it from Historical Concepts, and then to be joined by Barbara in creating this.
And we'll keep going with the slides in just a second, but tell me a little bit about, and I already know the answer to all this, but tell me a little bit about the rest of the rooms in the house and how you used the design of the interiors to sort of bring the outside in, and that's what I mean by light, really, and blurred that line, because it was an important pillar of this project, I think.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the property is unmatched, really.
Yeah. With
with all the live oaks. It's when you drive in to the property and they're on either side of you, you just feel like you're in another world. And they take, like you said, they take the stewardship very seriously. You're not allowed to park, I think it's like 7 or 8 feet away from the tree. They have these perimeters around the bottom. Some of them are actually 700 years old. Wow. I had my husband, who's a big guy, stand next to one of them, and I took a picture to show
the scale.
He's 6'1",
right.
and weighs a few pounds, perhaps more than he should. But anyway, it's it was amazing. They are amazing, and it's filtered light that comes into the house.
That's what I wanted you to talk about a little bit.
Which is really, really lovely.
All the drapery treatment.
All the window. Well, we kept it open. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't want to cover that, but you do want the softness of window treatments. Without it, it's a little hard.
Stark.
A little stark. And so in parts of the house, there are wool panels, that are sheer. You don't have to line them. They can also filter the light. We've actually ended up through time, because some of the front of the house, it's really the back of the house, but the house that faces the courtyard has no trees, and the sun is extremely bright. So we've added layers of window treatments. There are heavy cashmere cream panels.
Beautiful.
But then underneath that very thin wool that she can close.
Right.
It filters the light without blocking it.
And different times of the day. You can
Yeah, exactly. She just emailed me this past week because she wants to add some more, because the light gets so bright in certain areas. We're going to add that sheerness. But we definitely wanted to keep it open. And I spent a lot of time in the house. When you install a house, you spend a lot of time there.
Right.
We've kind of layered it in. And it really, I've sat there in the morning and just looked out and thought, what a blessing to be able to sit here and look at the trees that, where someone else sat under 500 years ago. I mean, It's crazy to think about that you're doing the same thing someone else.
And that the land has been so protected. There's no.
Yeah, it is. And it is something she and I talked about, especially Linda. I said, were you all prepared for this? Because it is, when you start to get into it, it's epic what you have to know to maintain that property and to make it even better and bring it back to a place
To simplify it.
Yes, and like all that beautiful Spanish moss is actually bad for the trees.
Right. I remember you telling me that.
They take it off.
Yeah.
It's so pretty, but they don't want it on there.
And then one of the next concepts, to me personally, this is absolutely the most important element of a memorable house, because to me, if I, for example, get scouting shots of a project and I don't feel like I have gotten to know the homeowners very well in looking at the photos, it just doesn't keep going in the process, because it may be beautiful, it may be the newest project from the hottest new thing, but to me, for it to make sense for Garden and Gun, it has to feel personal to the homeowners. And that means that the job of the architecture team, the landscape design team, the interior design team, that they've done their job really well in telling this, family story. And so this project, there's so many images of personal collections and just the way that they organized them, styled them, group them together. I'm talking about you, Barbara. It's just really, really cool, and there are a lot of stories behind the images that are here that I want Barbara to talk a little bit about, but it really does take a house from just being a house to being the story of somebody's life, and I think that's important. And I think a lot of Southerners probably do too. So.
They do, and we're not one to push a collection on someone who doesn't want it.
Right.
Like, I personally have a really pretty clean space because I'm around things all day, so
And you need a clean
I need
palette.
a clean palette when I go home to rest my brain. But both of them have very curious minds. They like to study the background of the things they collect, and so if on this on the screen. On the bottom right and left corners, you see his and hers galleries, and that's something that Historical Concepts created because they each have collections of things found on the property or other items that interest them that they wanted to be able to display. And so that's you walk in from the courtyard, and there's this long kind of gallery, and then on either end is a round room and an octagonal room. And the round room is hers, and the octagonal is his, and each one has its own personality. And that was created on the axis. As you look to the right and left, you walk in this, from your car into the house through the door, and it's really very striking.
And I loved how when we were talking about this before, you were telling me that a lot of their collections, it was just a good way to sort of consolidate everything together and make it make sense to be together, almost like little cabinets of curiosities in each zone. Because I think that's the dilemma sometimes when people do collect things is how do you corral them, how do you display them, how do you do it in a way that's really visually interesting. So I think that's so cool.
Yes, it definitely, we actually, before we install a house, if someone has a lot of collections, and Elizabeth, who's worked with me for 20 years back in the back, there's one client in Tulsa, we put out big folding tables, usually in the garage as our a staging area, and I'll say what is important to you, what are the important things, so we knew what was important to them, which are important artwork, and we'll lay everything out, and some things we don't put out. We'd say this is not that important. We don't want to junk up the house.
Right, exactly. You edit.
We'll say
what's really,
put
really
that away.
Meaningful to us.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Will you talk a little bit about the taxidermy too? Because I loved what you told me about just sort of putting that all in one area too, and maybe not in a bedroom.
Not in a bedroom. You don't want a dead deer staring at
you in bed. I thought that was so cool.
As you're trying to go to sleep, and that was really, again, their idea. It's all in one room.
Right.
And so it's all in that great room.
It's like a museum of natural history.
It really kind of is, and there's a story behind everything.
Says it will.
They've got a big painting I wouldn't have selected myself, but was special to them, of a giant elephant. We did not photograph that on one end of that room, but the scale of that room is pretty monumental. But because Jim and Terry are also wonderful with scale, even though it's monumental, it has the different, it has the chair rail height.
Right.
It has all the texture.
All the dimensions.
They sit in there and watch TV.
That's so cool.
And a lot of the material came from the site.
Yes, it did.
So that's really unusual. In fact, there was a lot of the longleaf pine that was being air dried there when they bought it. And then even beyond that, some of the things that came to it that was harvested from the property.
Yes, the study, for instance, most of the wood came from the property for the study.
What about the gorgeous bricks in the image with all of the kitchen utensils that are going across the top left?
Well, the brick itself is the Savannah Grays, and that is the same brick that's on the outside walkways. So when we were there, the outside walkways were put down in the 1700s. We actually did not change the walks.
Wow.
We left the walks exactly like they were, just like we left the garden exactly.
And then tied it through.
The path, and today, and our landscape architect, Don Hooten, and his team was so fabulous, you would probably change it. Would it be exactly working and the offsets. Now, so we just left it exactly like it is. So even where you would get into the carriage or you would mount your horse, there was this one big stone that was out there for this purpose that the walkway went to. And the turnaround for the carriage, we didn't change that. So something about it was really, I think, had a great spirit.
It's really hard to look at that image and think that it's new construction, but it is. It's just wild.
And that's a pizza oven that they use.
I mean, I believe it.
Yeah.
I would.
The builder burned all the hair off his arms are trying it out. He's like,
Well, it works.
yeah, it does. It did. He
Runs
wanted
a little
to
hot.
test it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, speaking of that, kitchens, I think, too, in southern houses, and really any house, to me, are what make them memorable. You know, in some houses that are older, kitchens were more of a service element, and they were sort of, you know, hidden and that kind of thing. But I love what's happened in the time that I've been editing, where they're really more of a central focus, and they're very much a part of the architecture and the interiors and that sort of thing. Because it really is where so much learning happens when you're a child, when you spend time with, you know, grandparents or your parents or whoever it may be. It just is, and parties and, you know, having friends over and all of those wonderful things that we did before COVID. Those are happening in a kitchen space. And this one, when I saw the photographs, it really just stopped me in my tracks.
Awesome.
Just the scale of the whole room and the way that it is softened by the layers of lighting and the natural light pouring in, that island, and the way that it looks collected, but it's new. It's wild to me that that was accomplished in a new project. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how the ceilings and just how you were, all of the millwork and the different kinds of wood that were used, all of that sort of thing, and why kitchens are a big deal to y'all too, because I feel like they are in all of your projects.
You can almost smell the apple pie being cut.
Yeah.
I thought the back of the kitchen was perhaps, and everything is detailed. It's nothing one big move and wow, and look how great you are and all. But when you look at the back of the kitchen, and you know also what the team did, and what happened with the finish on that corner cabinet, you would swear that this is 100 years old. And but it's not false. It's real, and how that came about. But then the kitchen itself, with this huge table and the storage underneath it, and all of the windows which look out to their garden and looks out to really. They also have an orchard, and they have winery. They have all these other things that are there. Wow. So you're taking advantage of what you see. But what we haven't talked about, and I want to be sure, what you did on the lighting and all the little specifics of it is layers of lighting. But do you know that this house does not have one can in it? Not one?
That's a very good takeaway lesson.
And that's hard to believe now, isn't it? And so you think about that, in particular with mounts and all the things that are there, and some of the things we're going through even today. But I think that that philosophy, which also came from these great clients, helped to give it, I think, its uniqueness. That's
and
there.
A warmth, and it's not, you know, trying to be something it's not. I don't know. I love the whole thing. But will you talk a little bit about the lighting? I love that story.
So this particular client, so some clients I say are willing to suffer for beauty. That means they're, you know, she was not afraid. They were not afraid to say, when I said, you know, it's location, the architecture, let's just not have any reason. Nowhere, not the closets, nothing.
Right.
Not a single downlight.
Great.
And they agreed. You know, we don't do that always, but they agreed to that, and were willing to go there with us. So in the kitchen in particular, the island is mammoth. It's gigantic, and I do like a strong focal point. Then you notice the detail. But so for me, that island was the strong focal point, and that arabescado marble with a thickened top on top of it, with that heavy veining is spectacular and breathtaking, and And so then the light fixtures are from Rose Tarlow. We get 1,000 calls, you know, about those. They're huge. They're about like this. You can't tell from the picture. And she does everything right when she does her reproduction. So the finish is amazing. So those anchor the center of that kitchen. And from there, you know, we had to look at the beams, where the beams have been placed. And we did it on plan, but then I went to the site, which is always best to do electrical on site, right? And worked with the electrician, who was amazing. I just talked to him actually a couple days ago, Matt Hooker, a super electrician, which always is great for us to know we're in good hands.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so then you have the simple shades. So we have the statement making pieces and the simple shades that do what a downlight would have done.
And they're glass.
And they're glass, so they just, you know, have a nice little glow. And then over the counter, we've dropped even further some vintage, they're like little glass spheres. They're from Radio Guy. I don't know if anybody knows who that is in New York. We swear he's always high, but he has, Steve, it has great things. He's on First Dibs. If you go on Radio Guy, I mean, it's using reclaimed materials and really cool stuff. And I mean, he has gas masks for horses from World War II. Really
wow.
Well,
wow.
Anyway, but we got, if you look at those little globes, they just glow over the island. And it's nice at night too. I've been in there at night. It's plenty of light.
Right.
So it's 3 layers basically of lighting. But we have those same little globes in the little pantry next. So we're kind of connecting.
Yeah, all the things together.
Yeah.
And then I also love, this is the like cutting flower kitchen.
Yeah, she wanted a place
in the middle
to do, and we got that sink at Architectural Accents, a vintage sink. There's off of Etsy, the little soap thing. She loved
I know,
that
when we were talking about all this, I was like, what is that?
Yes.
And it does something,
it
right?
has soap in it.
And you
crank it. Crank it, and it has little shavings that come out.
I mean, that's just so cool.
So yes, she loved a little detail. Like not every client wants to pay you to do that.
That kind of detail, yeah.
It costs
But that's
money,
what I
but
mean.
they
If
do.
you went in there and you were cutting flowers or helping them out with, you know, an arrangement or something, you would walk away and remember that that was
Oh,
in there.
absolutely. Sure you would. The color too.
Yeah.
Rob Christian, who is an amazing artist. He does a lot of work for Jim Howard.
He does.
Came and did, you know, all these finishes.
He needs to give a panel talk.
He's amazing.
I mean, really.
He is.
Yeah,
He's
like a
amazing.
Southern
He did
icon.
the ceilings in those galleries.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of time at the house. She had him do a surprise mouse somewhere in the house. She said, "Just surprise me." So he painted a little mouse. in the
Where was
corner.
it?
It was in the kitchen or the pizza oven.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
And memorable.
Yeah.
The next slide is also equally important, and that is just authentic details that make, that just give a room the right amount of layering, and I don't know, there's not really another way to describe that. But these 2 images were really important as we went through, because there are just so many ideas in each one. Is it a powder bath on the left? What stood out to me at first, before we ever discussed anything, is the sink itself. And obviously the fixtures that are used on the sink, they're both old. But what I learned beyond that is that it's sitting on a millstone from the property to sort of lift that vintage height, which is a little more diminutive usually, up to a more modern height. And you know, it's just so clever that even the hardware on the door, which is not old, looks old and appropriate. And the light, which you can't see very much, is from
Apparatus
in New York, and that's like just super modern against all of the sort of vintagey looking pieces in there. And I mean, that, I think you would also wash your hands in there and just look around like, wow.
It's a lot to look at.
They really did this the right way. And then on the right, there's so many ideas in here, but one of the things that I love that happened throughout the house is well, I think y'all both probably worked on this together, both of your teams, but they painted a lot of the millwork to call attention to those architectural details, lift that up, and just really make you notice the work that went into all of that, and how substantial it is. But who wants to talk about the art? because it's amazing.
Right. I'll let you do.
I just love this.
I love it,
Jocelyn
though, but-
Marsh, Ryan Hughes upstairs has a huge piece,
By the same artist.
like your height,
Oh, wow.
and on his showroom floor. And so sometimes we like to infuse just a little bit of modern to give a traditional
it's not
space
sweet.
A kick. I call it no stuck in the mud traditional.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I like that.
It still needs to feel current, and even when it's got great texture and lots of
Right.
wonderful old things.
Not stuffy.
Not stuffy at all. And so that piece, she saw that. I showed it to her when she came to Atlanta, and she loved it and was very open to adding that to the master bedroom. That's the master bedroom, instead of another oil painting or something like that. And so her work is, they're butterflies. I don't know if y'all are familiar. Some of you are shaking your heads. You've seen it upstairs at Ryan's. And it's a mirror in the back. There are butterfly wings. The body of the butterflies are bronze. And she suspends them from little tiny, wires you can't see, basically like fishing wire. And it's lit from within. So you get this kind of infinite butterflies. We've installed 2 of them. Elizabeth has sworn that we're not doing another one for a while, right, Elizabeth? But because they're a little bit of a challenge to get in undamaged and up and all that kind of thing, but they're amazing once you get them up. And so at night, there's a switch. I mean, you could switch it on, just be in the dark with your
ambient,
glowing butterflies
beautiful.
if you want to.
And also, it doesn't, even though it's modern, it feels really natural there because it's an organic subject.
You can pick the
It's
colors.
it's nature.
It's nature, right?
Yeah, you
but
can
done
pick
in
the
like
color.
an unexpected
But it's probably
way.
the most memorable piece of art in the entire house,
Yeah.
the whole collection. And if you could actually see
See it, I
wish
know,
I
it's
could
like,
take
doesn't-
all of
it's
it
hard to
all
communicate
there
it.
Go
and just
look at
walk
it,
you
yeah.
in to look at this. It truly is special.
It's really, really cool.
They added at the end of the project, they went online, well, they had like an auction, I think it was by phone, and they we have a couple Picassos, a Jonathan Pollock, some Walt Disney little sketches.
Original ones, cool.
Originals, a little Renoir, and so we added that. It was really great, though, to add something so modern into these traditional
Right.
spaces.
Yeah, and just mix all of that together.
Yes, it's very cool.
The scale was nice.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
scale wasn't just all big,
It wasn't big.
overpowering. Some of it was large, some of it was small, and how you balanced that,
Yeah.
I thought
No,
was
it
really
was
exceptional.
a pleasure to, place a Picasso. That was,
Yeah, I would be so nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The walls were awfully nice too, because
yeah.
there was no drywall.
No,
Right.
no drama.
Anyway.
You knew that it was going to stay where you put it. Okay, so this is the last slide, and we really could have started with this too, but this is something I also look for in all of the houses that we publish, and that is, I don't know, I can tell immediately if a house is going to be pretentious in dealing with the, the story itself and the design itself and all of that. I can just tell right away. And I think it's so much more, I don't know, there's just so much more depth when you notice the sense of welcome right off the bat. That doesn't mean that it has to be twee or anything, but there's just a quality about houses that are like this that is welcoming. And I'm going to throw it back to you now because this is very much your world. But the way that this house is actually sited on the land, which is where the original house was, is pretty amazing. And the way that it connects with the restored garden and interacts with all of the original trees and all the things we talked about at the beginning, is part of the reason that it reads that way. It's not a towering, intimidating place. It's friendly, and I think that's a testament to y'all. But
Well, you're looking right now at that garden that was done in the early 1700s, but you're also looking at it from different times of day. You don't think about that all the time
Right.
as you're doing something. Then when you're there on the site, you get these different feelings. And the glass room on the back, which is called the storytelling room, which is really interesting on how he came up with this. But that is basically an enclosed porch with the steel windows. And it's being set up with these wonderful Greek Doric columns. and pilasters. So all of these type of juxtapositions, and so you're looking at it in the day on the upper right, you're looking at it at night on the lower left. So it's really unique. And then you're looking at, you know, this garden at the same time, and also it's being framed by these live oak trees. And to be in that environment is just really so phenomenal. Our job was not to mess it up, to really to be able to create something that felt like it had been there for generations, and the client wanted that also. And so they were great stewards and the same. But if you're looking at this, looking at it during the day and looking at it at night, it's a lantern.
Yeah, it is.
It's absolutely the most incredible, beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And as it comes about. So all of these things, and you know, this wonderful architecture is what's really so great. There's surprises, good and bad, but there's surprises. And so this was certainly something that was joyous. And it's brought us joy as a firm. I think it's brought joy also to the clients. So if you're looking at this, you know, walking to that rear, which is the north side, almost north. And so all of this richness of texture as you walk there and you walk around. And those are the original walkways, by the way, that you're looking at there.
It's just incredible.
It really is. It was an incredible opportunity, is what it really was.
And the light, I mean, even in that shot, it's just
that dappled light coming through those live oaks. Now you got to remember, they're year round, so it's not like there's not going to be any leaves on these trees.
Right. So that's constant.
Yeah, it really is spectacular. And what Barbara was talking about, the front is totally different from the back.
Yeah.
And the gardens that were in the front, that we were now adding our touch to history. It's really nice to be kind of contemporary, but also wanting to fit in. So you had this very formal garden and this arrival as you came in from the car. So
yeah,
it was a spectacular part.
It's just gorgeous. And we're going to end on that because I'm sorry, but that is just so beautiful.
Doesn't get much better, does it?
And if anybody has any questions for these two very, very talented folks, or for me, we're all here. So go for it. Oh, I'm sorry.
On the walkways, how level are those? Like, they were laid in the 1700s and they're still using them.
Yes.
And
well, I mean, they're not perfectly level,
yeah.
but they have a feeling of age, but they're not. You're not going to trip on it either. And so it's laid in sand primarily, and the soil there, of course, is in the coastal plain. And so it wasn't like you were trying to lay it on topsoil or on clay or whatever. So it pretty much stayed. And it's really, really spectacular. What's unusual, particularly in the back, is this goes through this one gate back here. That's where that walk continues. So we had to make these walks work in plan, but it does kind of meander. So they weren't worried about exactly how it was on the old house. And I'm not so sure that would have been on the one that was built in maybe the 1800s or before, but it certainly was prior to the 1930s.
That's hard. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
It is,
you know, knowing that today, you know, even with your best
intentions,
hardscapes, it's so.
Yeah, you almost plan it. We're so obsessed sometimes on things. You really want it to be not perfect. You really want it to have something on the top, or have a feel to it, a crown.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. She was like, I don't have a question.
In the master bedroom, the fireplace shot, are those shutters that
There are.
I'm looking at on the legs?
On the, to reflect the heat.
Was that common? I've never seen that before that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't know whether I have either.
We saw a photograph. You know, we're all mimics, right? So we saw it somewhere in a book or a magazine and sent it to Terry, who was, Pylant, and said, "What do you think?" And he liked it. So I think what they were called summer shutters, I think, and I bet they were
Closed.
closed during the
Yes,
summer
because it
months.
would have, you could have gotten a
Yes.
bird in there or.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
but we just thought they were,
Keep the bird out.
we're just, these do work too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure they never have been closed ever. We just thought it was a good look. They just look pretty.
It's pretty cool.
And all the candles that you used also in this site, that was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of candles.
The bathroom was, the master bath. was
We really, like, y'all could stay here for the next 8 hours and we could go through every single photo from this project, with which they're all equally just full of all these layers. So it's a pretty incredible house. Anybody else? Nobody?
Terry Hoff.
Yeah.
Terry Hoff? Yes.
And he was one of maybe 4 or 5 people that were
in
interviewed.
Green Pond, South Carolina, outside of Charleston.
The final decision was made by the client.
Yep,
And
they were.
the whole project is in the book, right? So you
I
can,
think so. There's a lot of photographs. Where's Dawn back there, who works with historical concepts, 3 days with the photographer. I mean, there are amazing aerial shots
right.
of this property
I
that
mean,
are
it just
crazy.
goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and I think we have them on our website. You couldn't fit them all in a book. I mean, they'd be there.
You couldn't. This doesn't even scratch the surface, but I hope
His photos are amazing.
they really are. But I hope that y'all have
Thank you, Dawn.
learned some things, and had fun listening to everybody,
Yeah.
kind of explain their thought process.
One more quick question.
Sure. Yeah.
I know a little bit about this project from being friends.
That's,
but
yeah, because we have lunch every other week.
I want to hear you talk about the ceiling of her gallery.
Okay,
Well, her
we'll go
gallery
back.
ceiling, yes, very quickly, so the photo with the clouds and everything, the blue clouds, that's her gallery, and it has about 250 little LED lights, which sounds really horrible when she told me that she really wanted a sparkly
I wish I
ceiling.
could zoom in because
I
I,
know,
thought it
we
was
actually
painted
have,
on.
we took photos, little videos of it sparkling, because we were so fascinated by it. But anyway,
I
so
mean, tiny.
Yeah, they're,
Yeah.
tiny little dots. And
Pinprick,
so
yeah.
she wanted her wedding day in like 1862. She wasn't married then.
All
but I
the
mean,
stars
all the
are
stars,
represented
the
with these
sky.
lights.
Of what it would have
that
looked like.
night
Exactly.
on that
Very
It would have
intricate.
been 100 years.
on that ceiling.
Right.
So we had a big, we had it mapped out and had someone, there's a company, Chuck Spears connected us with, and the electrician had to pierce the ceiling, and they were, had to hit the ceiling with the light and then pierce it
be
at
sure it
each
was right.
spot. This is this great guy, Matt Hooker, a good old country boy. He did his job. He was great, very patient. So it really does sparkle too. It sparkles
And
of
moves,
that
yeah.
that night, and it is really amazing, I have to say. Sure,
Yeah.
her idea was you could put a round table, have like dinner for six.
Like under the stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has
And at
the
first
big
you were like,
star
"What?"
kinda
And then it
suspended
really-
from your- Yeah, I know. I was like, I can't believe. We'll just turn them off for the photography. Well, it'll be fine.
But it worked.
It did.
Yeah.
It is really magical.
That was a good question that you brought.
Yeah, Lee.
Yeah.
She's seen me. I've shown her the video at lunch before. So.
In the large,
Those ceilings are hand painted by Bob Christian, and
Yeah.
one has seeing Charleston in the distance, that's his, and a couple birds, and then hers, she wanted sort of, the sky heading into dusk. He's
Yeah.
amazing.
He is.
You
How
got-
old is he now?
I don't know.
Yeah. He's
not asking.
No,
yeah. He has just truly done
he's a
some
very
amazing things.
young 70. I don't know what he is.
Anybody?
There's a skylight at the top of this
Which one?
that goes all the way around at the main structure
Okay.
The
that
great
lets the
room.
light back in to this large room. And those beams are actually done where they're structural. They're not steel behind it. David Bryant in the firm worked as a timberwright in his younger days, where they would go out into the woods with no gas, no anything, cut the trees, cut them down, and put up a barn. So this was
I
the
can't
same
move.
thing.
Yeah.
So again, the attention to detail on something that's such a large scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
I just wondered where that lighting came from in the powder room again. That really
The
cool.
light, that's apparatus
Apparatus.
from Ryan Hughes.
Really cool.
Okay.
Last chance. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for coming.
listening.